Hey there, fight fans. You have got it tuned to Fight News Now, the MMA edition. Welcome to the show. I am John Pollock, and you are locked in for 30 minutes of all the latest news from the world of mixed martial arts. On the show today, an exclusive one-on-one chat with Olympic silver medalist and undefeated mixed martial artist Sara McMann, who is just a month away from her UFC debut. Plus, lots of people we spoke to in Montreal in the wake of UFC 158, including UFC President Dana White, Jake Ellenberger, and a backstage incident involving Mike Ricci and Nate Diaz. We've also got John Ramdine and Robin Black set for 3 rounds, and The Shift looks at an anticipated follow-up for gamers. But up first is all of the latest news. It was a dominant performance by welterweight champion George St-Pierre at UFC 158, defeating Nick Diaz after 5 rounds, with both seemingly squashing their issues after the fight, and Diaz saying he's considering retirement again. However, moments later, Nick Diaz spoke to Ariel Helwani on Fuel TV, and in true Nick Diaz fashion, we got a complete 180 on those thoughts.
Trying to retire. I'm trying to get out of this gig, but I would like a rematch. I think I could beat you. I really do. I think I could beat you. I think I could stop takedown first 2 rounds. You have to fight me the whole fight. I think I'll beat you. Really, I'm not hurt. This is hits like he hits like a woman. He has a full-on range to separate and punch me, but he hits like a girl because he's too scared to let go far enough to get a real punch in, because I'll get up and he'll have to fight me and move around.
It did not take long for word to travel to St-Pierre, who was rather disappointed at the change in tune from Diaz, as the welterweight champion reflected on his victory at UFC 158 and a record-setting 8th defense of his championship.
It was a tough fight. I'm kind of disappointed of hearing this. Well, you want to play that game. I felt kind of. No, I don't want to. No, I don't want to go with that. No, it's okay. It's okay. I'm gonna keep the high road and say it was a good fight, and yeah.
So is that where the drama ended for Diaz on fight night? Of course not. We couldn't forget that George St-Pierre works with world-class grappler Braulio Estima, who is scheduled to face Nick Diaz last May at the World Jiu-Jitsu Expo, but Diaz never showed up. The two had a confrontation in the back, with Diaz and teammate Kron Gracie antagonizing Estima and calling him words that would probably revoke our broadcast license if we repeated them. Meanwhile, Nate Diaz was busy starting his own issues backstage with Mike Ricci. Before his decision victory over Colin Fletcher, Diaz and Camp made their way over and started antagonizing him in the back of the Bell Center and gave him an uncensored report card on what he thinks of Ricci and his style. Later, Ricci explained what happened to members of the media.
Nate Diaz, he always has words for everybody. I don't know, what his problem is, but he doesn't seem to like me too much. Him and his brother kind of mouth off to me, maybe because they know I'm from TriStar and I'm affiliated with George and Rory, but I have nothing against the Diaz brothers. I'm actually a huge fan of the Diaz brothers. I love watching them fight, but if he doesn't like me too much, that's his business. I'm not going to lose sleep over it.
We have even more news from Nick Diaz on Saturday night. Dana White informed the media that Diaz was not showing up for the post-fight press conference, but later on he did appear and dropped a scary statistic that he has never paid taxes in his life and could go to jail. His trainer Cesar Gracie is denying this as truthful, but certainly led to grave concern from many, including UFC President Dana White.
To publicly admit on television that you never paid taxes in your life, that's something you don't tell anybody and hope they never come f***ing find you. You better handle that f***ing tomorrow. If there's one organization out there that does not f*** around, it is the IRS. Those are the last guys on earth you want. I'd rather have f***ing ninjas after me than f***ing IRS, man. I'd rather have the mob after me than f***ing IRS.
Lost in the shadows of UFC 158 appears to be welterweight Jake Ellenberger, who has quietly won 8 of his last 9 fights following a knockout of the night performance, stopping Nate Marquardt on Saturday night. Ellenberger understands that Johnny Hendricks is ahead of him for a title shot, but is confident in where he stands in the 170-pound class.
I've worked so much on controlling the range and moving in my footwork with my boxing coach and just getting faster. So, I know I can beat anybody in the world. So, like I said, I'm just trying to stay focused and take it one fight at a time. If it was up to me, it would be fighting for the title, but that's not up to me. I really haven't put a lot of thought much past this fight because I've just been so focused on Nate Marquardt, but hopefully the number 1 contender.
This Saturday night, the World Series of Fighting organization presents their second event as they hit Atlantic City, New Jersey. The card will be headlined by former UFC heavyweight champion Andrei Arlovski, who is unbeaten in his last 5, facing transplanted heavyweight Anthony Johnson, who doesn't see a long future fighting at this weight.
Unless, my man Ray Sefo and Ali ask me, this is probably my one and only fight at heavyweight. 205 is still where I want to be. Still my home, so hopefully, this is a good show for me and Andrei Arlovski, and maybe, win, lose, or draw, they might want to see a rematch, and I might have to fight heavyweight again, you know what I mean? So we'll just see what happens.
Going back to Montreal this past weekend, I had the chance to speak with 2004 Olympic silver medalist Sara McMann, who has put together a 6-0 MMA campaign since her 2011 debut, and is getting set for her UFC debut next month at UFC 159 against Sheila Gaff, as the women's bantamweight division continues to grow inside the UFC.
I was a little bit nervous at first whenever I learned that Strikeforce was, gonna fold, and I didn't know which way it was gonna go, if the UFC was going to take the women or if we were gonna start fighting for Invicta. So for a little bit there, it was kind of a little nerve-wracking, and I hadn't even fought for Strikeforce. So then I learned that we were in the UFC, and I was like extremely excited, and I was like, this is, the opportunity of a lifetime.
What kind of, from your perspective, what happened? Because when the fight was announced with Liz Carmouche getting the shot against Ronda Rousey, it was reported in many places that Sara McMann was up for that spot. What exactly happened? In terms of the UFC talking to you, or if even those talks happened?
Well, I didn't actually even know I would be, up for the spot at all, because I had never even fought for Strikeforce. And, I got a text message that said, "Oh, did you turn down a title fight?" And I was like, no, I didn't turn anything down, but it would be through my manager. So I text my manager, and I was like, did I turn down a title fight? Then, because if my manager said, no, we aren't going to take it, then I would have stood behind what he said. And he said, no, we weren't offered a title fight. So
you're doing a lot of work up here in Montreal with TriStar. Just tell us a bit about that relationship and kind of working under Firas Zahabi, getting set for April 27th.
I try to get up here whenever I can. Firas is an excellent coach, and you just don't get much better than that as far as, his MMA knowledge and experience and skills and stuff. So it's great. And there's some of the smaller guys in the gym, and everybody is awesome. They're very hardworking, and they come in and they'll help show you things. And I mean, it's just a really good environment to get better.
What can you tell us about Sheila Gaff and preparing for her April 27th?
Well, I know that she's strong, and she's been extremely explosive. She comes out of the gates very strong in her fights, and she keeps a very high pace. And well, that's actually that's an advantage too. I also like a high pace, so I think that's going to be a really exciting fight. And there's going to be a stand-up war, there's going to be a ground war, and it's going to be good to watch.
The growth of the women inside the UFC was punctuated on Saturday night by the announcement that the next season of Ultimate Fighter will feature Ronda Rousey coaching alongside the winner of the April 13th bout between Kat Zingano and Miesha Tate. The all-bantamweight season will be comprised of both male and female fighters living together in the house. What could possibly go wrong? And the intergender tough house is the subject of this week's tweet of the week from potential coach Miesha Tate, who's putting her marketing hat on with the suggestion of a great potential sponsor for the show, which seems to fit like a glove if you ask me. A hot button issue within the industry right now centers around transgendered athlete Fallon Fox, who had surgery back in 2006 and has been fighting women on the regional level. Joe Rogan was not shy to voice his opinion that Fox should not be allowed to fight women on a recent edition of his podcast.
She wants to be able to fight women in MMA. I say no f***ing way. I say if you had a dick at one point in time, you also have all the bone structure that comes with having a dick. You have bigger hands, you have bigger shoulder joints. You're a f***ing man, and that's her right there. That's a man. Women aren't that wide. That generates to increased punching power. Women don't have that sort of muscle structure. You can't fight chicks. Get the f*** out of here. You're out of your mind. You need to fight men, period. You need to fight men your size because you're a man. You're a man without a dick.
In almost a storybook-like ending, Mirko Krokop entered the K1 World Grand Prix tournament this past weekend in his hometown of Zagreb, Croatia, where the former Pride and UFC star defeated Jarrell Miller, Pavel Zuralev, and then defeating Ishmael Lant in the finals to win the Grand Prix tournament at the age of 38.
Odlična kombinacija Mirka.
Krasno. Napraviti nešto, Mirko ga čeka i Mirko ga pogađa. Filipović! Mirko Filipović osvojio K1 turnir u Zagrebu. Mirko Filipović ispisao je krunu svoje karijere. Bravo majstore!
And finally, UFC President Dana White revealed this past week to RDS in Montreal that in 2010, Vince McMahon made an offer to have Dana White face him at WrestleMania 27, or they could have done a legitimate fight if White preferred. The subject was brought up to White, and he elaborated at the UFC 158 post-fight press conference.
Vince and I were talking. You never know what's serious and what's not with Vince, but Vince literally said to me, you know, we could do a match in the WWE, or we could fight in the UFC, or we could fight in the WWE. That's basically what he said. I laughed and said, "You crazy?" He's a competitive maniac. Maybe he wanted to kick my ass on national television. I don't know. When you talk to him, when you sit down and talk to him, you don't know what the you don't know where you're at or where you stand. I've had a few meetings with him.
Dana White versus Vince McMahon, Mr. Ramdeen. You would buy that pay-per-view.
I absolutely would, but I also was willing to buy the Dana White versus Tito Ortiz show that never happened.
You and I ordered Yama Pit Fighting, so I think the two of us will just about watch anything. What is coming up on 3 Rounds today?
Robert and I discussed the second offering from a Las Vegas-based fight promotion that features a former UFC welterweight facing a former UFC heavyweight champion. Can you believe that?
That does not even make sense. All of that is coming up next on Fight News Now. Welcome back to Fight News Now. It is now time to head on over to the stars of our new show, 5 Rounds, that you can see every Monday night here at 7 p.m. Eastern. But today they are going the non-championship bout limit. And guys, UFC 158 revolved around the welterweights. Can we make sense of the top end of the division now?
Yes or no?
Not me.
All we know is that Johnny Hendricks is supposed to be facing George St-Pierre maybe in August is what it looks like right now. A former UFC welterweight will be taking part in the World Series of Fighting. That goes down in New Jersey this coming weekend. We look at the positives and negatives of UFC 158, and then we examine a 205-pound matchup that could determine the #1 contender in the UFC's light heavyweight division. But we talk about the World Series of Fighting and what a main event these guys have. Anthony Rumble Johnson, former UFC welterweight, now moving up not to middleweight, not to light heavyweight, but to the heavyweight division to take on former UFC heavyweight champion Andrei Arlovski. You want to talk about entertainment? This matchup screams entertainment. These guys are going to take the center of the cage, swing, and somebody's going to fall, and I don't know if it's going to be Andrei Arlovski.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I'm excited to see it. You know, we spend a lot of time talking about all this other extraneous stuff in fighting. Who called out who and who said what and who has sex before a fight and all this kind of crazy stuff. But sometimes it's just great to see 2 high-caliber athletes go at it, and that's what we're going to see here.
Andrei Arlovski, just so talented, and I think he's one of the guys that a lot of people throw under the bus because of the fact that he's been knocked out in a couple of encounters against Fedor Emelianenko is one guy. Exactly. So people just say that he's not the best Andrei Arlovski we've seen, and quite frankly, I don't think he is. I think he still has room to improve, and he believes that he can maybe with a victory get back to the Ultimate Fighting Championship, and that seems to be where everybody wants to be right now in the sport.
Yeah, hey man, sometimes we forget. We all kind of live in this bubble where we watch fighting all the time. We're on the internet, we're reading, we're talking to all these people. But for a lot of people outside of the UFC, they're just not aware of what's going on. And if the last thing you remember about Andrei Arlovski is him standing in the cage getting punched in the face by Tim Sylvia, what, 6-7 years ago, then you don't realize how good this guy is and how exciting it is going to be able to see him fight Anthony Johnson at the heavyweight limit.
A couple of former UFC veterans also on this card, Josh Berkman, Aaron Simpson. I like the co-feature, Marlon Moraes coming off that victory over the former WEC champion Miguel Torres, takes on Tyson Nam, a guy that ended up knocking out Bellator champion Eduardo Dantas. I really like this because World Series of Fighting trying to develop their own stars, and this is what they need to do because, like Andrei Arlovski said, with a victory, he could bail.
Yeah, for sure. And this is is the good and the bad of operating outside of the UFC. When everything is done well, you can find these two great athletes like this. This is as good a fight at 135 pounds as you can find outside of the UFC. Both of them very relevant, very talented, young and exciting, but it's also sometimes a little scary what you end up with on a show like World Series of Fighting, because we have, on the other hand, Paulo Filho fighting, who is, been a bit of a documented head case. He's had his own challenges with drug addiction and mental issues and stuff. So, we get a bit of a mixed bag sometimes. But man, this is going to be a great show. A fight that they're not going to show on the main card, but it's going to be on the undercard. Rick Glenn going to be in action. This guy coming from the Rufus Sport team. Tune in to see this guy because I know he's going to be a star, probably at the highest level. We got to talk about what went down in Montreal, UFC 158. George St-Pierre doing what he does best. I want to talk about the fallout. One of the things that they were talking about is kind of the mind games the Cesar Gracie team or the Nick Diaz team was playing. They said that there was problems with George's gloves, and I think it rattled Firas Zahabi, got him ticked off because there was people invading their camp as George is trying to get ready for essentially the biggest fight of his life. Yeah, and I was talking about it off the top that, there's a lot of things going on outside of seeing great athletes compete in a great sport these days. But this kind of mental warfare is actually somewhat relevant, One way you can beat your enemy is by taking his eye off the ball, confusing him. If all of a sudden George's warm-up was thrown, if his mind was unfocused before the fight, that's a way you can win this fight if you're Nick Diaz in his camp. But, they had Firas Zahabi in there, and if you've ever seen Firas in a back room, man, there's nobody on earth you would rather have there keeping you focused. He acted like a pro, said, hey, man, you can look at our gloves, we'll put them in a bag, we'll send them to NASA if you want, but we are going to warm up our athlete, and you guys can screw right off.
A lot of people are blaming Cesar Gracie right now. He wasn't there for Nick Diaz, but I don't know if the blame should be on this guy. This is what we've seen from Nick Diaz over his career. This is a guy that after his fight with Joe Riggs ended up fighting in the hospital with this guy. He's just a loose cannon, and maybe he just doesn't know how to control things. Yes, Cesar Gracie might, like any team, blames their coach. They get fired, whether it's the NHL, the NBA, or whatever. The team loses, the coach gets fired. Don't forget, Cesar Gracie got Jake Shields a title shot, Nick Diaz a title shot, Nathan Diaz a title shot, and Gilbert Melendez a title shot. So, yes, it was also those guys because they're high caliber fighters. But quickly have to get to the 205-pound matchup. Gegard Mousasi going to be taking on Alexander Gustafsson April 6th in Stockholm, Sweden. I really like this fight. I think this is the time for Mousasi to shine, but he's facing a guy who is really hitting his stride. 15-1, only lost to Phil Davis, and coming off that big win over Shogun.
Sometimes it's really hard to completely put together the right fight. Gustafsson is a rising star, and Mousasi is a legit test for him. Unfortunately, the average fan may not realize it, but Mousasi is a top 205er, and I think he could come from behind here and unexpectedly steal this from Gustafsson.
I agree. And John, the problem with Mousasi's game in the past has been the wrestling element. So hopefully he's been working diligently, because if the fight goes down to the ground, he might not have an answer for Gustafsson.
Yeah, very, very big test for Mousasi as he moves over to the 205 division in the UFC. We thank both Robin and John, and we're going to take a short break. Lots more coming your way, including this week's viral video. Don't blink or you'll be seeing double when Fight News Now continues. We are back on Fight News Now. Live fights are coming your way this Saturday on Fight Network with Glory 5 from London, England, headlined by Tyrone Spong, who made his MMA debut late last year. He will be taking on Remy Bonyaski in the main event, and all of the action kicks off at 3:30 p.m. Eastern with 12 big fights on tap. But right now, we're giving you a shock to your system. You know why? It's time for The Shift. Back in 2007, we were introduced to the first-person shooter game BioShock, and now 6 years later, the much-anticipated follow-up, BioShock Infinite, is upon us. Nick Diaz is not the only one with a few debts he may or may not owe, as we follow Agent Booker DeWitt as he looks to settle his tab as he ventures into Colombia.
I gambled, and now I owe money to men you don't want to be in debt to. I come here to pay it back.
while this game is set in an entirely different location, it has different characters. It still has the essential DNA of the original, that its spirit. It's very much a BioShock game, but it allows you to go to an entirely different place.
What is this place?
And that place is 1912, where America has basically created a giant floating city in the sky called Columbia.
What caused Columbia's secession? Where did it disappear to all those years ago? Where is the rest of the city?
As former Pinkerton agent Booker DeWitt, you'll fight your way through a vast and traverse landscape known as Columbia in the first-person shooter.
It's DeWitt! Get him!
You can upgrade your weapons as you play, and you can use the skyhook tool to zip around the city and get the jump on your enemies.
The skyline! Follow me!
Booker, look out!
But there's more to BioShock Infinite than just pulling off awesome kills.
At the very beginning of the game, you're basically told, under mysterious circumstances, that in order to repay this, to wipe away this debt that you owe, you need to go and bring them this girl.
Bring us the girl and wipe away the debt.
What did I do to them?
She is not an ordinary woman. She has some tremendous powers.
The girl is the flame that shall ignite the world.
What am I? What am I?
Elizabeth isn't your typical damsel in distress. As you fight to protect her, she'll hook you up with health rations and booster ammo, and if you die, she can revive you, but it's gonna cost you. BioShock Infinite is available March the 26th, and should reaction be similar to the first BioShock release, then you could definitely label it a double knockout. And that takes us to this week's viral video.
You got B, you got him, huh? You got B, you got him, huh?
Another great find. That is all for us this week on Fight News Now. I want to thank all of our guests, including Sara McMann, Mike Ricci, Jake Ellenberger. Don't forget, Glory 5 goes down this Saturday afternoon at 3:30 p.m. Eastern here on Fight Network. You can follow along with play-by-play at fightnetwork.com, where you can also hear the full interview with Sara McMann on this week's edition of the MMA Report. On behalf of John Ramdeen, Robin Black, and the entire Fight Network crew, I am John Pollock. Enjoy all of the fights this weekend.
George St-Pierre, if you give me a rematch, I really appreciate it, because I think I could beat you.
No.
I'm going to keep the eye road and say it was a good fight.